Everybody ready? So for those of you who are the proposers, think you know and you heard the other day what our format is to be like. It will be a 10-minute or so verbal introduction of your team, the principles, the philosophy, that sort of thing. And then we are going to ask you some common questions and then some specific questions. Before we begin that, is there any public comment?
Yes, Sarah Alger, as you know, I represent Sandra Lundeen, who is an abutter to the 40 Old South Road project. And I know I've said this before, I want to reiterate our position that this site is wholly inappropriate for a number of reasons for the proposed Mass Medi Spa proposal. I also just want to note my disappointment that the committee chose to accept that RFQ, given the fact that it does not appear to meet the minimum requirements of the RFQ proposal. I'm also concerned about the submission of additional materials by the applicant subsequent to the RFP cutoff date, and particularly the amendment cutoff date, which was 24 hours prior to the RFQ deadline. I think if the committee requests additional documents, that may be one thing, but for additional documents to be coming in after the end of the RFQ is completely inappropriate. I've already asked you to look carefully at the location. I also want you to look carefully at the applicants themselves. I have serious questions about the community involvement of the Mass Medi Spa proposal, and hope that you look very, very carefully at the way that this has been structured, at how people have become involved, and how this will be run going forward. It doesn't look to me at all like it's a local proposal or anything that would be good for our community. So thank you very much for bearing with me these past 3 meetings. I really appreciate the ability to have input.
Thank you, Sarah. I think as we discussed yesterday, we have legal advice on our end to proceed with both proposals right now. And as far as the submission of additional materials goes, I'm not aware of exactly what you are referring to. One group has emailed me today. I have not even read the email yet with what looks like additional materials. I have not passed that on to the committee at this point. I have referred it to town council, and I think the advice is that the committee can consider whether or not it even wants to accept that information. So we haven't even, that's not even on our agenda today. All right, Act Natural, you ready?
Okay, thank you. Members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to present and hear a little bit about Act Natural today. Act Natural is, can you guys hear me okay? I know
Yes.
the microphone. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Act Natural is a locally owned by seasoned business owners with extensive experience in all aspects of the legal cannabis industry. We understand firsthand the importance of preserving the island's unique culture, directly supporting local island initiatives, and possessing the experience to adhere to the Cannabis Control Commission's stringent regulations. My name is Mike Sullivan, and I am CEO of Act Natural. I'm a longtime resident of Nantucket, and I am the owner of a local business called O'Dear. My first steps in the cannabis industry were when I co-founded a distribution company to export cannabidiol from the United States into Brazil, mainly working with medical patients there and mainly with epilepsy. A staggering 3% of the population of Brazil has epilepsy, and I was able to witness firsthand, working with doctors in Rio de Janeiro, the effects that CBD has with patients there. I then since became involved in a few other businesses in the cannabis space, including opening of a dispensary in Fairhaven called Basque. With me today are a few members of our team that I'd like to introduce and let you know some of our experience and get to know our management team. The first here is Doug Layton. Doug is a longtime summer resident of Nantucket and will serve as CFO of Act Natural. Doug and I have been friends a long, long time and go all the way back to grade school with his wife. Doug has invested in a lot of businesses here on Nantucket, and his first investment into cannabis was in 2013. Doug was co-founder of Basque, which is a Fairhaven dispensary, and as he co-founded that, he worked right alongside to open Basque, where he gained experience in just about every aspect of the business, creating business plans, implementing, monitoring RMD policies, procedures for compliance, cultivation, production, manufacturing, inventory, security, just about everything in the beginning of a startup. Over the past 25 years and counting, Doug has been very generous with many on-island charities, and his family's generosity is very well known. Second on our team is Zach Harvey. Zach will serve as COO for Act Natural. Zach was the co-director for fundraising for the Dreamland Theater when he used to own a house here in Nantucket. The facility downtown that we have and all enjoy, Zach helped raise the funds to get that open. Zach co-founded Airmont, which is a dispensary in Braintree, Massachusetts. While he was there as co-founder, he was instrumental in writing many of the policies and procedures that are used there today. After leaving Airmont in 2017, Zach co-founded VYB Holdings, which specializes in crafting cannabis products that target and address specific needs for medical patients. His hands-on experience in cultivation, extraction, distillation, processing of cannabis, and he has a full knowledge of cannabis strain management and cannabidiol profiles. All of his knowledge and expertise we will use with Act Natural to make sure that we have the most consistent and quality products in the market. The three of us formulate the foundation of our team, but as you've seen in RFQ, we have quite a few other people involved in Act Natural. We'll take a moment to touch on a few of them today. Bob DaCosta. Bob is the current operator of Albacore Charters and RDI Consulting. He will serve as our Chief Security Officer. Bob's a Nantucket native and a military veteran. Bob served on the select board, as we know, for 6 years. He was also Nantucket County Deputy Sheriff for 10 years. Bob will oversee and implement our security plan. Our security plan here has taken the best practices from Basque and from Airmont to put together a policy that we think will be second to none. So far to date, both Basque and Fairhaven have had 0 incidents of violations for their security plan. We plan to take that same success here. I'd like to discuss briefly Chapman Dickerson. Chap will serve as Act Natural's initial head of cultivation. He'll be responsible for mentoring local growers that will ultimately serve as our head of cultivation. Chapman will oversee the setup of our cultivation facility. He currently serves as CEO and head of cultivation for Basque in Fairhaven. We're very proud of this. Basque boasts the highest pass rate for any marijuana testing facility in the state of Massachusetts. And we hope to take that best practices here and rise to the same standards. Our local cultivator will be James Briere. James is a 9th generation Nantucket native, and he has extensive experience with environmentally friendly cannabis production. Next, I'd like to touch on Seth Yaffe. Seth will serve as head of retail and production for Act Natural. Unlike the alcohol industry, a dispensary has to grow all of our products in-house and have seed to sale tracking from beginning to end. Zach has overseen this as Director of Operations in Airmont, the facility in Braintree, and he's currently Vice President of Productions and Manufacturing for Revolutionary, which is another large state cannabis dispensary. His extensive expertise, we plan to have him teach and train all of our staff top to bottom so we fully understand and are 100% compliant with everything from start to finish when it comes to production. Testing. Tate Keegan is going to be head of our laboratory testing. Tate is a Nantucket resident for many years, and he is the owner and operator of Nantucket Environmental Laboratory. They started testing drinking water here in Nantucket all the way back in 1994. Tate has experience in analytical testing, equipment implementation, certification protocols, lab quality assurance, records management, and Tate will oversee our in-house setup of testing. Our management team already has a an existing relationship with CDX Analytics. CDX is one of the 2 labs in the state that are certified to test independently test cannabis. So our ongoing relationship with them and our in-house lab with Tate's tutelage, we believe will put together a protocol that will be the best and meet and exceed all state testing. Lastly, I'd like to touch on Jay Humans. Jay is a member of our legal team from Smith, Costello, and Crawford. Jay was a senior advisor to the commissioner at the Department of Public Health. He helped pass into law Chapter 55 of the Acts of 2017, an act to ensure safe access to marijuana. He also penned the Commonwealth's medical use of marijuana program in 2015. We're lucky to have the author of a lot of the Cannabis Control Commission regulations on our team, and again, to make sure that we are always 100% compliant moving forward with state law. As you see in our RFQ, there are other people, and in a request for time, we'll like to say thank you at this point. And I just want to let you know, to date, we first applied our application back last winter in February with the state of Massachusetts. And as of now, we are up to date with our application there. Our application has come in front of the select board last spring. And to date, Act Natural has met and collaborated with staff and department heads from the police department, the fire department, the select board, the planning board, the energy office, the Department of Public Works, and the Department of Health. Our plans have recently been stamped and approved by HDC, and we've responded to all questions to this point, and we're ready to answer any more. But at this point, we really feel like we're ready to move forward. Ready to move forward, yeah, thank you. We've been asked not to criticize our competitors' RFQ, and we've respected that request. We hope that we see the same results. For good and for bad, we'll be the face of Nantucket cannabis. We live here. 12 members of our extended team are members of the Chamber of Commerce. I'm a business owner. My wife works at Nantucket Cottage Hospital, and my children attend the public schools. Now and moving forward, we will always have the best interests of the island in mind. We will work at the will of the town now and moving forward. We've given our response to the RFQ proposals considerable thought and attention. Our answers are honest, truthful, and we believe highly advantageous across the board. We hope that our dedication to Nantucket has shown through the committee, and we really want to thank you for your time, and we welcome any questions at this time.
Thank you. So our first common question is, what is your general business philosophy? I think you covered that a bit, but...
Sure, I can touch on that a little bit more. On page 85 of the RFQ is our mission statement and the beginning of our business plan, and I'm sure you can review that at length. We plan to operate a safe, compliant dispensary for both patients, medical patients, and adult use. Act Natural will test all products up to the state standards of the Commonwealth. Our philosophy is to operate with the harmony and spirit of the island, which includes local support in all aspects such as local jobs, working with craft growers where the law permits, and working with the community at large. We also understand issues of traffic on the island during the high season, and we have plans in place to make sure that we do our best to mitigate that. One of the ideas we have is to use a Genius bar, similar to Apple, to have appointments only for recreational dispensaries. This means that people will only be allowed to come to the dispensary at an appointment given time during a high season. We do have man traps that are required by the law, so you're only allowed into the first door when you're allowed to be there by appointment. Then your ID is checked, swiped, and you are confirmed that you are who you are and of legal age, and then you're led into a second door into the dispensary. Again, we've worked with the will of the select board to this point. In the town in general, we do know that this will change over time, and we are willing to do what it takes to make sure that our dispensary is a world-class dispensary, but it also is serving the needs of the island.
Thank you. Does the committee have any follow-ups on that?
Can you just explain the testing equipment real quick? So it sounds like you have on-island tester. Is there a machine that's like supplied for that, like a standardized testing apparatus? And then there's also someone you're working with off-island who also does testing? Can you
Yes.
Just elaborate.
Absolutely. So that was one of the questions coming up, number 4. We might as well tackle that right now. I'm going to introduce Zach, who knows more of the ins and outs of testing, to answer that question.
Thank you, committee. Yeah, we will have. We'll be working with the CDX Labs out of Salem. As Mike mentioned, they're one of only 2 ISO certified labs in the state. As you might mention, there's only two because it's actually fairly hard to get accredited. Under their tutelage and guidance, we will be essentially replicating on a smaller scale the lab that they have up in Salem. And two types of equipment, to answer your question directly, will be HPLC, which is high pressure liquid chromatography, and gas chromatography. The first is used for microtoxins, mold, more commonly known, pests, and heavy metals. We will meet state levels of that, although we're not required here by law. Obviously, it's better for the patients, the consumers, and mitigation of any litigation, obviously. Almost more importantly, or equally important, is also the cannabinoid profile and actually meeting the milligram contents of the active ingredients, which is not as oftenly spoken about, but I think will become a much more a bigger national problem, which is, you know, the standard deviation of what the labeled content of, particularly THC, but other cannabinoids as well, versus what's actually contained in the product. And Massachusetts itself has been on the forefront. Some people call it onerous testing. We consider it to be actually very protective testing for the consumer. So the second part will be gas chromatography. What's not mentioned is that we will actually be able to test via third-party labs, both MCR, with whom we have a relationship that precedes us, and CDX themselves, and we can do soil samples. And what's important about that, of testing the soil in cocoa, or whatever medium is used for growing, is that many of the heavy metals that actually end up in the plant, which are tested more at the biomass plant level, can be contained and mitigated at the soil level. So we will actually send those out to the more professional third-party labs. And the third leg of that stool, so to speak, will be our relationship with the craft growers. And we feel and hope that down the road, hopefully sooner than later, both from the regulated, call it THC medical market, but also with the recently passed agriculture bill, which allows for hemp, we hope to have very close and associated relationships with the craft growers to not only have some sort of regulatory training via our incubator, but also to allow them rights to our testing and sort of teach them in the ways that will protect our patients and consumers at large. It's a long answer for.
So just to distill that, sorry. Off-island lab, state compliant, has all the equipment in Mass.
We will buy the equipment.
Yeah, then
for,
you replicate smaller lab here locally. But
yes.
Still use, so you're testing you're doing it in both places.
So no. So we will replicate their lab in a smaller scale. So obviously we don't need to test for 30, 40, 50 other groups. So we can use a smaller version of their machinery. In sort of more layman's terms, the footprint is approximately, for each of the equipment, is about 4 by 2 at their stage. So they have multiple levels and replication of that equipment. We will have, you know, in our laboratory, which will be off of our extraction lab, the entire footprint for both pieces of equipment that I'm talking about is the size of 2 steel rolling tables. They will help calibrate, regulate, and oversee what those very, very complicated pieces of testing equipment actually spit out, and what we can do at the growing level, at the extraction level, and certainly at the production level to help implement what the lab tests say. So anyone can say, oh, I'm going to buy this equipment. You need to know what to do with it, and we'd rather rely on the professionals to help us than try and relearn something in a complicated business. Yep.
Any other questions from our group on that?
I have a question about the support for the craft growers and how the testing, sort of the testing and some of the extraction equipment
I'm sorry.
will, in your plan for supporting the craft growers, are you supporting them in sort of making some of those value-added products as well, or more so just buying the sort of raw product from them and then you're doing all the extraction and creating the value-added products?
So initially, because of the regulations that are in place right now, we'll actually be required to more work with them as a service and training and educational piece, both as employees, if they wish. Certainly, I mean, that's a big value add for the island. And eventually, when we're allowed, we hope to be on the forefront of actually working with the craft growers to purchase and they have them be an integral part of the supply chain of our, whether it's the biomass that they're producing, the trim, their flour itself, but certainly at the onset, it will be their formulations, their products that are unique to this market, and that might also not be just the active ingredients, but the essential oils and all of the other non-cannabis or hopefully hemp-derived product that it's separately regulated under the agriculture, the Department of Agriculture. Okay. So we hope to work from the outset to set those relationships via the education, incubation, and purchasing of their formulations, and work all the way through to hand in hand with the state, be an actual part with them being part of the entire regulated.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So I guess following up, so I'm kind of thinking it, I think like you're thinking of it. If they want to sell their flour through your dispensary, are they using your testing equipment to get in the door, so to speak, or how does that, or are you not even?
So unfortunately, they're not allowed by regulation that you have to be, and Jay can actually add some flavor to this, but they can test through us as a service, and that we can offer from the outside, and we think that's the biggest value add within the law at this point. We again want to take that and hold their hand and vice versa, to the point when we believe that their medical program, which is known, as the craft growers here, but is known as the caregiver to patient network throughout the state and at the official level. At this point where we stand now, it's two separate silos, and while they're both governed by the same regulatory body, there's not any cross pollination of actual product allowed.
But there's nothing to preclude them from using your testing equipment.
Exactly, or much of our equipment. And one of the specifics that we can get to reaching that would be to every employee and even some of your major vendors actually are required by the state to have identification cards and be part of the system, which means have full background checks, query checks. And what we can also assist them with is to have them become registered agents for us. And what it does is when those regulations do change, which we anticipate to hopefully be in the near term, they can actually be integrated into part of our entire ecosystem. And that means from the product, from the formulations, from the IP, all the way through to the actual lion's share of the profits that are associated with those products and services.
Thank you.
And if I could just, Jay Yeomans just wanted to add one piece of clarification. The reason that this is so important is historically, you have seen no medical applicants both in Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard because of the federal waters that surround the islands. And so under the Department of Public Health's medical use of marijuana regulations, applicants had to have their products independently tested in order to have those products allowed to be sold to consumers, or in this case, medical patients. An important change in Chapter 55 of the Acts of 2017, which was the legislature's rewrite of the 2016 Adult Use Ballot Initiative. It also included important changes to the medical use statutes and rules that are currently in place. That includes a specific carve-out, thanks to your state representative and state senator, a carve-out for the islands to use an island-based testing system. The issue is that, as Zach just covered, many of these craft cultivators don't have the capital to purchase this extremely, expensive equipment. And so I think an important asset that Act Natural is going to bring to this is using this equipment as a community asset for these local growers and community. So we look forward to working with folks on island to use that resource. But I just wanted to clarify, I think you were getting at why do we have these two testing resources? The answer is because none of these testing facilities have built second facilities here on island. So we're going to work closely with them and have them oversee our testing. Thank you.
Any other questions about the testing? I guess we've covered that one now. Right, our second common question is, do you plan to focus your business plan on Nantucket solely, only, or elsewhere?
Yes, I'll answer that. We do plan to be here on Nantucket solely. Our group is Act Natural, and we do plan to be just here.
Do you, a little follow-up, and then you guys can ask follow-ups too. Do you think that, you might never be able to say right now, but do you think you'd have any spin-off groups, corporations, whatever, that might branch out elsewhere?
No, we don't.
Okay, so you're planning to have like a sole source business here only?
Yes. We don't, yes.
If any of the rules change around moving product off island, do you anticipate sending any of your product off island?
I think realistically, the amount of cannabis that's being produced now, there's a bit of a shortage in the state, but I think in the next 6 to 12 months, there's an enormous amount of canopy being grown by some big corporations. There's some big corporations right now that have 1 million square feet of grow under construction. So I think that there's going to be such a glut of cannabis off island that I can't imagine that. I think that, you know, what we're going to be able to grow here is enough to service patients here. I also think that we have a facility big enough to have a little bit of wholesale that we could potentially sell to another dispensary on island to help them if they don't have enough canopy. But aside from that, I don't see that, because I think very shortly these big corporations are buying up huge square footage of grow, and 1 million square foot of grow compared to our small grow. I don't think that, I don't see that happening.
Follow on from that, and it sort of has to go with one of the next ones about the anticipated volume of customers. Are you anticipating that you're going to be able to completely supply your demand with the canopy space that you have planned with the current location? Or do you anticipate needing to bring in product from elsewhere? And is the craft growers more of a, it's nice to have the craft growers eventually maybe, but you think you're going to be able to supply yourselves completely?
Sure, I think that gets into one of the other questions, and we have Doug to answer that. Did you know that?
Doug Layton. Thanks for having us. Yes, I believe that our canopy will produce about 1,500 pounds a year, which is more than ample to serve not only our patient and consumer base, but also potentially wholesale to the Green Lady on island.
One of the benefits, though, on top of having just the total amount of canopy and associated biomass that we'll be able to serve, I think that where the craft growers will actually help is that they have separate, as we said before, products and also strains that will be unique, and actually both for us and for them, having, as with any retail experience, having multiple SKUs and variations of product type are beneficial to everyone. So at that point, whether or not we could actually produce enough doesn't necessarily mean that we would keep all the lights on, so to speak, and I pun intended. But if you think about, we all know how kilowatt hours can approach 20 cents in August and July here at peak times. One of our plans is to actually mitigate that and plan our harvest accordingly, so that we actually, during those happen to be probably the larger months for the retail experience, and just 10 times the amount of people on island, we'll aim for more having our cross-trained employees be selling then, and have our predominant lights on at the time where we're saving more energy, energy's cheaper, and we can actually control our outcome a bit more. And at that point, that's exactly when the craft growers who are mostly growing outside, or hoop houses, or all the sort of fundamentally sound ways of growing that we're not actually able to because of regulations. Right. But it kind of gives both groups the chance to shine.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anybody have any other questions about that? Okay, our third common question, can you provide an estimate as to your anticipated volume of customers? Would you be willing to help fund roadway configuration changes in the future if need be, if the town deems that the volume of business so necessitates?
Great, we'll have Doug answer that. Thank you.
We estimate about 20 customers per hour on a 9-hour day, which is 180 customers per day in the high season. Now, those people will obviously not all use cars to get there. We have a shuttle. The bus stop is a 3-minute walk from our location. There's bike path, and obviously there's carpooling. So we don't, yes, we will in fact help fund roadway improvements if need be, but I don't believe that will have to take place. And we're also willing during the high point, especially in the beginning, be able to work with the police department on details and anything else that the town requires of us.
Can you confirm that you intend to use an appointment system?
100%. We're
Okay.
going to use an appointment system. That's how we know it's a max of 20 per hour for consumers. For patients, they do not have to make an appointment.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a follow-up on that.
Sure, yep.
So you have an appointment system that's going to bring 20 per hour. You think that supports a downtown shuttle? The need for a downtown shuttle?
Yes, actually because of the meeting yesterday, we now have an arrangement with the Chicken Box where the shuttle will run from the Chicken Box parking lot to our facility. And yes, I think a lot of people come to Nantucket without a vehicle. I would probably say more come without.
So you're saying it's going from the Chicken Box, not from downtown?
Correct.
Okay. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. All right, we've got some proposal-specific questions. How many employees do you expect to have? There are a couple of different numbers in different places of the proposal. In-season, off-season. One section of your proposal, there's an expectation of 35 employees year-round, and in another section, it's got a couple of different numbers. So explain for us the basis of the number. I'm sure you probably can't be totally exact right this moment, but we'd like to know a little bit more about that.
Sure. I believe the proposal says up to 35 full-time jobs. And at peak time, we believe there will be, to start, 31 people. That consists of 14 people in the front of the house, which is retail manager, patient counselors, bookkeeper, marketing. Back of the house is growers, trimmers, inventory, things like that, security, and that's a total of 31. It will obviously fluctuate in seasonal months where it'll be higher and lower in off-season.
Anybody have any other questions about the employees? I think you had some description about employee housing. You have a bit of a plan to house.
Yep. We have Mike Sullivan owns a property, which we will be able to house, I believe it's 8 people. And if we need more, then we will either have to build or purchase property in order to house those people.
Okay. Regarding the business plan, are your funding assurances binding? And please explain.
Sure, I don't understand that question.
Okay, let me say something to our group about the business plan. I think in our discussions yesterday, we had some business plan experts review the proposals and also review the RFQ language. And I think the feedback from them was that neither proposal provides a very strong, detailed, confident-sounding business plan. There may be those things, but what was provided makes that difficult to evaluate. None of us is, except maybe Henry, is a real strong business plan analysis expert. So I think what we are trying to find out is your business plan sound? Does it have backers that are reliable? We at some point, I guess, want to know who they are and what their commitment to the island is, that kind of thing. So when we say your funding assurance is binding, I'm not even sure 100% what we mean by that, except,
Can I take that up?
yeah, please do.
Where are you getting your money, public, private? Are the people sitting in this room that I'm looking at providing the money? Are you doing, general partnership limit, you know, how did you get the startup capital? I mean, this all costs time and money, so where'd it come from?
Sure. That's why I don't really understand the question, because in our proposal it says flat out the principals, the three of us will be providing all of the funding, but we are also allowing many Nantucketers, if they choose to invest alongside us in the dispenser. But for the most part, we will be providing the funding ourselves. I think there might be some confusion with the letter of intent and the other applicant or something, but it was very clear that we are in fact providing the funding. We had a letter from our CPA saying that there was ample capital for us to build out and sustain the business.
And I think what I didn't see in the business plan, I thought the 5-year projections was a very short time frame, and I didn't get a real understanding of exactly what that capital is. There was some breakdown, but and not that we can fix it now, but I definitely felt like it was a bit of a, don't worry, we have money. But I didn't find the business plan to be very explicit about exactly short-term and long-term how this was going to work. So,
One thing too that actually, since it wasn't asked, maybe it's a better time to explain it now too, is we have an on-island real estate partner. So it's not actually in the same way as the other applicants, so to speak, where it's all self-contained. We're actually, in a common sort of build and lease scenario, the building itself will actually, the base building costs will be borne by our real estate on-island partner, and all of the cannabis related building costs, tenant improvements, working capital, and everything affiliated with the cannabis operations and execution will all be borne by us. So it's actually, so if you're looking at a $7 million project, it's a half and half. And, we certainly could give you legal affidavits as we stand here now, if you'd like, that we can afford it and that we will bind it, in essence.
can I just ask, was the real estate agent member, were they not mentioned specifically because it's less than a 10% contribution?
It's less than 10% ownership, which is
Ownership, right. Okay.
So by nature in this state, approximately 45 to 50% of all the transactions are actually not wholly owned real estate. Many, by nature of landlord or necessity of the financial situation, many landlords actually in the state, if you think about it sort of in layman's terms, if your average return is about a 6% on real estate these days on sub-institutional, you can get a 14 or 15% return from a cannabis tenant.
Yeah.
A lot of landlords are actually choosing to invest in the industry via that route. It's called not touching the plant in a way, if you've ever heard that term, and it's fairly common.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Can I ask one more question? Can someone elaborate on the investment opportunity that you mentioned?
So our structure is to allow many people who have approached us to invest into Act Natural, where we're going to allow and waive the normal minimums for most locals that in fact want to invest and sort of pick up whatever amount that we will allow them to invest. And there's sort of two theories behind that. One is we want to democratize investing in a Nantucket business for locals, for islanders. And two, it's a great source of advertising for us. I'm an investor in 5 restaurants, bars in Nantucket, and I have approached owners, staff, bartenders, and it is a great way for us to be able to advertise the dispensary. You go in and have a drink, and someone asks, where's the dispensary on Island? Where do you think they're going to send them? But it also allows a lot of people that necessarily wouldn't have access to this to, in fact, invest in a business and in a cannabis business.
Thank you.
I have a few questions. This goes into the security plan to some extent and some of the community ideas for the community. And one of them was you're proposing to put amnesty boxes at the airport and somewhere else. I mean, how's that going to happen? Do you have, how are you going to secure them? Who's going to manage them?
So if you go back and read the plan, it says that both the amnesty, we can cover question 3 and 4, the amnesty document and the detection dogs were suggestions for the town's use of the 3%. So as far as the security and are we paying for the entire lifespan of a detection dog, we haven't gotten into that. We're more than happy to work with the police department on that. But those were suggestions for the town. We weren't proposing we were going to do that.
Okay, that's not how I read that in that plan at
Okay.
all. And detection dogs, the marijuana law pretty much made those irrelevant, useless, basically. So that's not even something we'd probably consider. But the amnesty box was kind of an intriguing idea because it will be a problem at the airport specifically. We need to follow that up. I guess it brings up another question, something that came up recently I'm a little concerned about. Maybe you have the answer, explanation. In your plan and on the security page, I can't remember what page it is right offhand, maybe 9 or something, you make a statement that the plan was approved by me, essentially. I've never approved a security plan for a facility. It's not my role. I did assign that responsibility to one of my sergeants to review the plan and offer suggestions. His email to me just today was that he had sent numerous emails to the principals and participants of the organization, never once met with anybody from the organization other than somebody from the alarm company. I also got an email from another town department who stated that your plan says that you talk to them about energy ideas extensively, and that it's reported that nobody ever contacted them. So what's true in this plan and what's not true in this plan? Because there's at least 2 false statements.
On July 17th, we met with, upstairs here, we met with everybody that we had stated.
That's what you're considering the meetings?
No, we met with everybody and gave them the opportunity to come back with questions. And we had worked with Erica, Town Council, to come back with any questions. So what I was saying was, to date, we have answered all questions and we're welcoming any more. So far to date, we have met with them and we do welcome more questions. But to date, we've answered all of them.
I think that's a very misleading statement.
I apologize. I apologize.
There's at least 3 department heads in the town that feel as if you put misleading statements in this plan. That's very troubling, because what else is misleading in there that I don't know about?
Well, we didn't do that deliberately. I did say that we had met with staff or department heads for each of those. And, we've been trying to be as transparent as possible. We've been to every select board meeting and planning board meeting for close to a year now, and we are trying to be as transparent as possible. We have had conversations with these people, and we have had back and forth with them, and we have done it under the guidance of town staff. So if we were misleading in any way, we're not. To date, we've really worked hard on answering any questions, going through these things, adding them, making our proposal something that kind of works, as things change. This has been a very long process. So we've had welcome feedback and adjusted to it as best we could. And like I said today, we will continue to work, at the will of the town as things shake out. So I apologize if the department heads feel like they haven't had fully been heard, but we have had an opportunity to meet, and we do realize that we'll have more opportunities to meet as we move forward. If we're selected here, we do realize that we'll have follow-up with all the department heads to make sure everything is clearly done. So again, I apologize if you think that's misleading. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure it's that the department heads feel they haven't been heard. I think it's that there are some statements that seem to indicate that they support or endorse a particular plan and they don't believe they did that. So the amnesty box suggestion, back to that for a moment. How do you propose to manage them, or are those details not totally worked out at this point? Okay. Okay. I agree with the chief. I didn't really get from the, I realized they were suggestions. I didn't really get that that's what the 3% of the town revenue would go to. It sounded more to me like a community benefit that Act Natural would provide, but it sounds like that's not quite the case. Although maybe you'd be willing to discuss it if we proceed. Okay. I think you've answered the question about the downtown shuttle. That's a different location now. Thank you. Back to the business plan. Does anybody have any other specific questions about that? I don't know if we totally finished that off. There was a reference to your local real estate on-island partner or something like that. Is that person not mentioned?
Well, the options in that leases.
That's who we're talking about. Okay.
Libby, I just had a question. Maybe this is for you to answer. This license or whatever is issued, is it transferable to other parties, or are basic? And I guess applies to both of these groups. Does it?
The discussion that the select board has had to date is that would be addressed, I believe, in the host community agreement, as well as the regulations that are not developed yet for the licensing. Mm-hmm. And the board's intent has been that no transfer could occur without specific approval by the board.
Okay. I'm curious because, we at the planning board is a special permit, and we spend a lot of time with the individuals in front of us. And we typically, where there's a complicated project, will restrict it to those parties unless there's a further review. So I'm just curious about that.
That was a significant concern of the board, and they spent quite a bit of time talking about it. And we were advised that the couple of ways to address it are through the host community agreement and through licensing regulations, which we'll be talking to you about anyway.
Okay.
But the idea is that no transfer whatsoever can occur without very specific approval by the board.
And I think in conjunction with a sunset clause as well, to sort of, those two together, I think, are making it very specific to the applicants as they are today.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anybody have any other questions that we maybe didn't cover? Okay. Do you want to make a closing statement of any kind?
I just want to make one quick comment. As it was said, when it comes to the recreational use of marijuana, we're going to have an appointment system where 20 people per hour will make appointments and they'll come in. I also wanted to reiterate that we're very concerned about the potential for anyone underage trying to get in the facility and purchase marijuana. So we're going to have a ID scanner there, as well as we plan to have all the front of the house security people tips trained, even though it's not a requirement, to know how to look for fake IDs. We take it very seriously.
At this moment, I want to thank the board for your time. I know you're volunteering, some of you, and this has been a big undertaking. We've been at this for a long time, and we're very happy today to get the opportunity to speak and let you know a little bit more about us. We're trying to be as transparent as possible all along the way. We feel like we are local. We're very well funded, and we do have the experience needed to open a world-class, first-class dispensary here in Nantucket. And we will, moving forward, keep the island's best interest in mind. We understand that this is a new process. It's new to this town, and we do realize that we'll have to adjust as we go, and we're willing to do that. now and moving forward. So we appreciate it again, your time, and we hope you consider our application. We do feel that we work very hard in that RFQ and that we are, our answers are all highly advantageous across the board. So again, we want to thank you, and we look forward to hearing. Thank you.
Sorry, this one, I just wanted to ask one more question. And I know there's probably an easy answer, but the comments you made, Chief, just they don't sit well. And I would just like to hear that there's a commitment to really taking on board the comments from the department heads and being very sincere about making efforts to work with the different departments. I don't like being told people have done something and they haven't actually done it. So, I think there's a lot of responsibility that goes with being one of two dispensaries, potentially, whichever applicant it is. And I would just like to know that whoever takes it on is committed to sort of a high level of integrity and working with the town on this.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. This process has been morphed as we first applied. We first applied, and our application was very similar to what Green Lady did. And then they decided to go to a checklist form the town council created. When we did have that checklist form, we went through the checklist with the town with the meeting upstairs. And after that meeting, we were told in a letter from Erica that we had completed and checked off everything that was required. And so at that point, we were told that we were going to get our community host agreement and our letter of non-opposition. So we were very excited at that point, and we had been told that we had met all the requirements. I understand now, hearing that there has been more and the thing is morphed, but at that moment in time, we were told we were getting our community host agreement and then after that, things changed and they wanted to wait to town meeting because there was a vote about who it was. So at that moment in time, we were told that we had been vetted and we were, ready to move forward. We've been nothing but transparent. We do want to let you know we're here. We do, have the highest integrity, and we know as this morphs that this is going to change, and we're here to help work with the town as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. I think that we all could agree that the process has changed quite a bit as we've gone through it. This is the first time we've ever done this. There are bound to be some bumps along the road. I don't know that you were ever told that you would get a host community agreement and a letter of non-opposition, because that would all have had to go to the board, although there was some sort of early to mid information that host community agreements needed to be prepared before people went further in the process. So I hear you about the sort of discrepancies in our own process, and it was difficult for us to keep track of as well.
And in no way am I being accusatory. It was just that the process was morphing.
Yep.
And at that point, we had met with, so as there is some confusion with some heads of departments, at the time, it's very different. And I'd like to just make sure for the record that we clear that up, that we have, fully transparent.
Thank you. All right. Last minute comments from Act Natural? That's it? Good? Yep. Okay, thank you guys very much. I think we'll take just a 4 or 5 minute break till 2:30 for Mass Medi Spa.
Did you get that? Yep. Okay. Is it the right date?
I know, the business plan. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
All right, good. Oh,
That makes sense. Yeah. And there is it like a bear trap where if you put your hand in it too far to pull out? Yeah.
Leslie said,
Okay, so you just slide it right in there. But that would make sense, so it would have to be police.
Yeah, I mean, it's just whoever has the keys.
Yeah.
I guess.
okay.
Yeah. I'm sure that ends up on.
Was that in the security plan that you're talking about? Yeah. When you have a chance, can you just tell me the actual page? It's not long. I think you should make that. Oh, wait, 3 o'clock? No. I know. It's my fault. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the separate thing.
4?
Yeah. Yeah. This was the thing on the separate page.
Sure, we're going to print out differently. Because it was.
It's not urgent. Oh, okay. That's the Judith one? Okay. Let me ask the committee if they want to. So just stand by.
I just want to do. It's page 101.
Which aren't even on the warrant. So.
Not even on the list.
So they got enough in the warrant.
I know, but I'm not.
As I was looking at it,
We have the hearings essentially closed.
You guys ready?
Huh?
Ready? Okay, I'm gonna get back. Second interview, Mass Medi Spa. Steve has just indicated that he has written responses to our questions, and so I said that I would ask the committee if they wanted to accept that. I would have a bit of a concern that we did not offer that to the other group.
I think as well, if there's anyone listening, or I know people can read it, but at the same time, I suppose both applicants being treated fairly, and we hadn't considered that before.
No, we hadn't,
Yeah.
and I think we really want to make sure that we're doing the same treatment to both, like you say. So I think we will not take that right now.
That's fine. That's why I asked.
Thank you. Okay, so introduction of the principles, the team, the philosophy.
Sure. So, as you know, I'm Stephen Cohen. I'm an attorney. I've lived here since 2005. I have a daughter in the school system here. My wife is a Nantucket High School graduate, and I do not smoke pot. So why do I have this as a client? I've never been an advocate for this use. I actually voted against. I'm one of the minority of Nantucketers that voted against the referendum question. But the thing is, this is going to happen in the state. It's going to happen on Nantucket, and it's really important for me and my family and our community that it happen in the right way. And that's why I'm involved with this application. And I think that Mass Medi Spa is the best applicant, and I'll tell you why. But let me give you a little background as to who Mass Medi Spa is, okay, and why it is what it is. Mass Medi Spa is a nonprofit corporation. It's not a charity, it's a nonprofit. They're different. When the state first started issuing medical-only licenses, it was a requirement that you have a nonprofit and that nonprofit then engage with an operator to move forward with opening a dispensary. And that is, Mass Medi Spa predates that, or dates back to that regulatory structure. And we think that it is important to maintain that regulatory structure, or that structure, because it has a lot of advantages for the local community. Mass Medi Spa was originally started by different people. Those people were really in Norwell. They were interested in a facility in Norwell, and they also went after the Nantucket license because they saw it as an opening. The Norwell facility is not happening. Those people are no longer involved. They're always going to be on the Nantucket, on the Mass Medi Spa paperwork, because they were the founders of it, but none of them are involved anymore. Okay. There is a operator called South Shore Biopharma that was going to be the contract operator. That operator has since been acquired by a company called Acreage Holdings. Acreage is a multi-state company. It's in 18 states. It's been involved in the industry since 2012, when Maine was the first state to do medical only, and it is involved in every aspect of the industry. It does growing in some places, it does dispensing in some places, it does consulting in some places, and in different states it does different things. It is, one of the most professional and most experienced companies, and that's why Mass Medi Spa has selected Acreage through South Shore Biopharma as its contract operator, because what Acreage is bringing to the table is the experience to do it right the first time, for equipment, for training, for policies, for people, for procedures, for everything, and also the financial backing to be sustainable. Acreage, as you may or may not know, is a publicly traded on the Canadian Stock Exchange. It's got a $2 billion market cap. All of that is public information, and it is a company that has got staying power. Okay, it's not going to be worrying about nickels and dimes or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's a massive company that's bringing those resources, but it doesn't have any control of or ownership of the license. 100% of the license that's being applied for is going to rest with the nonprofit board of Mass Medi Spa. So who is that board? That board is only Nantucket residents. There are 5 year-round residents and 1 resident who is a seasonal resident who's been coming here for 35 years. Okay, Joanna Roach owns a local business, owns actually 2 local businesses. She is both in the wellness industry, in the organic wellness industry, and has Act Fresh, which is an organic beverage company. Joanna is bringing to the table unparalleled expertise in wellness centers so that someone coming to our facility is not coming to a retail pot shop, they're coming to a medical wellness facility feeling that way. That's what we want. Okay, we have Andrew Spillett. Andrew is the head vegetable grower at Bartlett Farm. Andrew knows more about anybody about growing things on Nantucket in vast quantities. There's no one with the food safety expertise, there's no one with the growing expertise on Nantucket, more than maybe a couple of people in the Bartlett family, but that's it. Helene Weld is a registered nurse. She is on the board of Mara Mitchell, and she actually can't be here today because she is dealing with strategic planning that nonprofit has had on their books for a long time, and she's committed to getting that done for that organization. She's also involved in the Tick-Borne Illness Committee with the town and the Board of Health with the town. She's committed to public health issues, she's committed to nonprofit issues, and she's committed to making sure that this happens positively for Nantucket. Dan LeMaitre is the owner of a local seafood company. He's very experienced in running small businesses on Nantucket, and he's very experienced in food quality and consumer quality issues on Nantucket. Dan is also very involved with the local grow community, and he's bringing both of those expertise to the community, to the board, to make sure that craft growers and home growers have a voice at the table. And Kevin Flynn has been coming to Nantucket for 35 years. I'm sure you all know him. He works with nonprofits that deal with children and wants to make sure that this happens in a positive way for our community. Those 5 people have 100% control of all of the license if it's awarded to Mass Medispa. Acreage would have no control of the license. Those people could fire Acreage, they could hire somebody else, they could do anything that they want. And what's great about them is they are all longstanding members of our community. So this is a 100% local application by people who have only the community involved, but have no financial interest involved. They are not motivated by making money. They are not motivated by profit. They are not motivated by their own financial interests. At the end of the day, no matter how much money this makes, it doesn't go in their pockets. If Nantucket closed its eyes and said, how do we design a license that could be for Nantucketers by Nantucketers, it would say, let's have a nonprofit of Nantucketers that controls the license and makes all the decisions. And in fact, Nantucket has already done that at Sherburne Commons. Nantucket had the opportunity to have a for-profit entity come in, and it said, no, we're going to have a local board, a nonprofit come in and do that. And that board will hire some experts to help with some things. But what it will really put on the table is people who are not financially motivated, but are community motivated to be in charge. And that's the model we're bringing to the table here. We also have an advisory board of a lot of people. I'm not going to go through everybody on the board, but basically if you look at the list, I think you will know a lot of those people and what they're bringing to the table in terms of community involvement and expertise in sustainable growing on Nantucket or in healthcare issues on Nantucket and other things like that. Then that board has looked at how do we make the best operations happen here. And the way you do that is you get the best locally and you get the best nationally. So for instance, locally, we've and I'm very proud to announce that this was something I just forwarded to Libby this morning, and she probably hasn't even seen yet, that Jim Ellis, who's the former sergeant with the State Police Barracks, has agreed to act as a law enforcement liaison with us. Jim has decades of law enforcement experience and is willing and able to bring that to make sure that all laws are followed and that all police procedures can be followed to the best available means. We also have Mike Albert involved. Mike is an expert in the technology of security and does installations in private homes and commercial businesses at the highest level of security technology. So we've got the security end of it and the law enforcement end of it, or the technology end of it and the law enforcement end of it, covered by people who have decades of experience in both of those. We have assisting them Frank Matthews, who's a former third in charge at the Mass State Police, who currently acts as a consultant at local dispensaries in Massachusetts and would act as a consultant here and to provide that transition and training and expertise to make sure that all of the security, both the technology and the law enforcement, is at the highest possible level. So we have local and we have currently practicing state officials. Andrew Spillett, I said, would be overseeing cultivation. Andrew already has more experience than anybody in that area, but would also have access to and help from the national experts at Acreage and South Shore Biopharma. We would have Al DeMaca, who's here. Al used to run a dispensary in Connecticut and now supervises all the dispensaries in Connecticut, and he's a pharmacist and comes from that pharmaceutical background, and makes sure that those facilities are engaging in tech training and from a pharmaceutical perspective and a counseling perspective for patients and clients that is understands what dosages are the right dosages, what strains are the right strains, and what can be treated and not treated with cannabis products. So we have expertise at the local level, and we have expertise at the corporate level to both train, transition, and support. And these people from Acreage are not someone who has another full-time job and is available for a phone call. They're people whose actual job is to be in a support role for facilities, if you get the difference. So we would have both local and corporate expertise there. We would also be hiring probably in the range of 7 or 8 professional level staffers, and in the range of 15 to 20 and possibly 25 seasonal sort of trade, labor, retail employees. So that's creating a lot of good jobs. We have 2 sites that are being proposed, and those sites were originally developed when the regulatory scheme was different, when the situation was developing, and at first we thought that the Old South Road site, the 40 Old South Road site, would be a fantastic site because it is remarkably available for foot, for bus, for bike, and for car, and we would have a 20,000 square foot lot for the facility and a 20,000 square foot lot available for ancillary uses like parking or housing or whatever. You know, the way it's played out, that's probably not the site that the town wants to see moving forward with, but we also have secured a 20,000 square foot site in the Coffin Pit, essentially next door to the Act Natural site, but it's twice as big. Their site, I believe, is about 10,000 square feet. The availability of that other site means that we could use it for employee housing, we could use it for ancillary parking, we could use it for any kinds of other needs that are available if the town decides to go forward at a Coffin Pit site, at the Tomahawk site. So what we have is a group with significant funding, significant resources, and purely a nonprofit mission. So what does that nonprofit mission mean? It means that we're focusing on medical issues, whether they're prescription customers or whether they're prescription patients or whether they're customers who are really coming in who have undiagnosed or self-diagnosed issues but don't want to be in the medical system for whatever reason, whether it's personal or job-related or whatever. But the reality is that most people walking in the door at a dispensary are coming in for treatment, whether it's medical or otherwise. And we want to make sure that that's the approach, that everybody coming in understands that that's the approach that's being taken, that this is for people who have medical concerns, anxiety, PTSD, epilepsy, cancer, hospice, any kind of situation like that. And that's going to be the focus. The nonprofit is not going to be having weed brunches during stroll or parties at the brewery in order to generate Nantucket as a destination of location, because that's not the kind of business we're in, because we're not in business at all. That is, we're not profit focused. We're patient and customer focused. The money that's disclosed in our application comes from Acreage or South Shore Biopharma, and it's done in a contract basis. Once the money comes in and those expenses and fees are paid, any leftover money or additional revenue is controlled entirely by the nonprofit. It doesn't go into the pockets of the board members. It doesn't go off island. It doesn't go anywhere. And that nonprofit has the ability to make commitments to the town to fund healthcare initiatives, to fund traffic and road improvements that the town is definitely going to be looking for a commitment to, and my client is willing to make a commitment to. It has the ability to fund a full state lab in the same way that Act Natural covered some of those details. We are also have contracted with the other state company that worked on the regulations for the state and support states. So both companies are essentially bringing to the table the ability to have a state level lab here and to offer testing services to craft growers and home growers if you want to have your soil or your product tested, so you can find out, is this contaminated? Is it clean? Is it strong or light? What did I just grow and what should I do with it? Those testing services would be available through our lab as well, because it's going to be a community-focused opportunity. Our application also has made a commitment to make donations, and for example, the town is looking for over $100,000 right now to help fund mental health transport services off island. I know the hospital doesn't want that, the police department doesn't want that, the town doesn't want it, nobody wants it. It's a massive community problem with no home, and it's something that if the town was interested in seeking a source of revenue for support for that Mass Many Spa would consider it to be an honor to take on something like that, because quite frankly, a lot of the people in that situation are in the situation that we want to try to redress, which is mitigating substance abuse, mitigating opioid addiction, mitigating mental health issues, and those are the kind of people that end up needing those kind of transports off island. The other thing that the nonprofit would be in the position to do is to encourage craft growers, because our facility would be essentially twice as big as the Act Natural facility. The lot is twice as big. It has twice as much parking. It has twice as much growing capacity. We would be able to offer a guest grower facility so that craft growers could come in and actually grow within our facility and sell within our retail space as designated craft growers, and then also use testing equipment, but also have outside development so that you could have education and training and inspection and other kinds of support, so that as the state regulations and federal regulations advanced to allow more outside activities, that people would be in a position to take advantage of that. But they'd also be in the position to participate day one through the guest grower program and other testing and growing opportunities. And because we're not profit focused, because we're community focused, nobody's a competitor. So we could supply to Green Lady if they didn't have enough capacity to support their growing facility, or we can work with craft growers. There's a specific question about whether or not there would be guns on site. I just wanted to clarify with that no Mass Many Spa employee or Acreage or South Shore Biofarmer employee would be armed. However, if the police department, in consultation with the police department, if there was a determination that there was a desire in the community to have armed guards, we would have a third-party armed guard contractor. But we don't anticipate that that's going to be the request of the police department. But if it is, it would be met with. But if it's not, we understand why that might not be desirable, and it wouldn't be something we would advocate for. There was a question about Dr. Franculio. Dr. Franculio was with the staff meeting. He's an anesthesiologist who was at the staff review meeting that we had over the summer, and he runs the pain center at Dartmouth University. He is someone who Acreage has a relationship with, where he's the head of medical advisor and assists with all research opportunities that we have, including a recently awarded Drexel University research project that Acreage is going to be participating. It's one of the only real true clinical research projects on marijuana in the United States that's going to be moving forward. Because Dr. Franculio was out of state at the time, was out of the country actually at the time that the non-disqualification requests were requested, and because it had to be notarized, his partner Dr. Brockman submitted one instead. So that discrepancy there is just because one was available to sign the form and the other one was not. It's not that he's not affiliated with us or anything like that. So because Mass Medispa is a nonprofit, it can focus on things like medical research and cooperating in clinical studies without worrying about the cost of those things. And because Acreage is a big company, it's already participating in those things. And that's the kind of company that the Mass Medispa wants to work with.
A couple questions.
Sure.
The interest rate on the loan. To me, that looks like a nonprofit's not making any money and then paying an exorbitant interest rate to a company that does make money off an interest rate.
So,
And then, follow up to that, Acreage has no control, but then what happens to the debt if you fire Acreage?
so I'll answer the second question first.
Just in light of that.
Right. So Acreage can be fired at any time. If Acreage is owed money, we would bring in somebody else and we would pay off Acreage. So,
That explains.
right. So it's a relatively simple answer. The interest rate does look high if you're comparing it to the interest rate that you'd pay for a house. It's actually not high for the interest rate that you'd look at for this kind of investment. Marijuana is not financeable commercially, and it is not financeable by most gold star investment companies. It is only financeable a couple of steps down the road, and that kind of investment has a higher interest rate. And frankly, I think if you dig into Act Natural, you're going to find that their investors and their other companies that are involved in their financing would get similar terms. They would have preferred payments, and they would have preferred interest rate, high interest rates. At the end of the day, this is going to be a situation in which millions of dollars is spent building out a facility in which both companies are going to try the best to provide the best facility they can, right? So at the end of the day, your choice is going to be, do we want somebody who is going to have a great facility that also has to worry about making money and putting money in their own pocket, or do we want a great facility where that's not an issue, where they pay their bills and then the rest of that money is available for the nonprofit to use in our local community? But I assure you, I assure you, all the
As a small business owner, I disagree with that, but we're all gonna make a living, right?
Yeah, no, everybody's gonna make a living. People who work at Mass Medispa are gonna be paid well. People who invest in the business, who supply things to the business, everybody is gonna be paid. It is a business, but the question is, the license holder who controls it, who ultimately has control over the profits, what are they going to do with it? Are they going to put it in their own pockets, or are they going to put it back into the community?
How does that affect retail operation, considering there's already another free market operation going on? Like if Green Lady's free market, and then these guys have billions of dollars to pay all the bills, how does Green Lady compete?
I think the Green Lady is going to have scale issues that are far outside that. Right. Listen, Green Lady is going to make plenty of money because I think the market will support 2 units. But it's not that that Mass Medispa is going to come in and undersell the market because they're in it to lose money. It's that the profits are going to be owned by the nonprofit entity and will be contributed back to the community, as opposed to profits that go to shareholders and investors in their pockets. And that's the advantage. At the end of the day, both companies are going to have tons of expenses, and both companies are going to have lots of people who make money. But the people who own and control the license are nonprofit, non-financially invested people.
Can I ask
Sure.
then, I was a little bit confused about then, who are your first 5 hires? Is that the operations team that was mentioned in the strategic plan, and who's actually running this day to day? Who is getting paid?
Well, so it's tough to say who's going to work at a place that hasn't been built, that hasn't been licensed yet. You can't offer a job to someone do you want to start 18 months out on something for a license I don't already have?
So to clarify, the nature of my question was more, who's opening with Act Natural, it's very clear, at least to start, who's going to be there, who's going to be running around doing the day-to-day.
Yeah.
They might hire 4 or 5 people in, they've named their grower.
Yeah.
I can't figure out in the Mass Medi Spa who's actually
Sure.
going to be
So
doing that.
we would anticipate if this moves forward that Andrew would be the head grower, Andrew Spillett would be the head grower, that Joanna would come on to help run the operations. There's also Mike Alpert and Frank Matthews for security, and Chris Tolford, who's here, could maybe answer some more of the specific details on who would be involved in different roles. I don't have the whole register.
Yeah, it's really a process through the whole thing, right? The Mass Medi Spa board would work directly with Acreage to find those key people that will get this up and running, right? It's really a process, and that's where Acreage brings the expertise. We've built out a number of grow facilities, a number of dispensaries across the country. We've seen the process, right? And we failed and learned from our mistakes as well, right? And I think that's a big process that, we bring that expertise to work with our board here as well, right? It's going to take a long time through permitting, through construction, through build out, right? We would be working directly with this team on that. Once we get ready to be operational, we anticipate holding job fairs out here, with the board, with the local supervisory board, with a community impact manager that's going to, we already have a toolkit per se, right, of all the job descriptions on what everyone's doing, right? We just got to find the right people here in the community, right? And going back to, Steve had mentioned the jobs we're creating, quite a few of them, and almost all of them, will be full-time year-round jobs, right? Plants need cultivation managers and technicians to grow year-round, right? We anticipate growing the plants year-round, so we don't really anticipate any seasonal workers on the production side. It's really on the retail side. That's where we would see an uptick in traffic and patient flow. But again, that's where we would work with our community impact manager and our local supervisory board. A lot of the connections that they have here in the facility. We do not anticipate hiring people from the mainland to work the 9-to-5 jobs here. That's not how this is going to operate. Acreage is really bringing the resource, right? The education, the standard operating procedures, right? We're a phone call away to answer any question, because chances are we've seen it all across the country, right? And there's someone within our network that they can call that can work on the specific problem that we're working, that is unique to Nantucket, whether it's the grow, whether it's the education that we do in the dispensary.
But I think the short answer to your question is people who live here year-round, who are sitting in this room right now, whose names we've given you, and who also are from Acreage, are the people who would be boots on the ground, butts in the seats, starting in the design, operation, and build out of the facility. But we don't have 30 people hired. We don't even have 10 people hired. I also think it's important to note that in order to work at this facility, you don't just show up and hand them your resume and then get a job there. It takes actually thousands of dollars and many hours to get approved. And what Acreage has is the ability to get people licensed and certified to work in a facility like this, and has other facilities in which they could go to train in advance, so that someone could go and then come to Nantucket and start day one with the experience that they need for a successful opportunity here. And that's not always the case, where someone is starting from scratch and they don't have the ability to fund licensing for an employee, and they don't have the ability to offer training for an employee. And Acreage has both of those.
So essentially what you're saying is the 5 people that make the sort of executive board are going to be really the people sort of growing this from the ground up.
Correct.
hand in hand with the operations team from Acreage.
Yes.
Is-
And other people like Jim Ellis or Mike Alpert who aren't on the board but might be in other roles.
Does Acreage charge them for those services, or how does that work? Because that can't be. So if Acreage is putting all this time in, because those 5 people I don't think have any experience in the cannabis industry. So how, just to get their loan money back, I'm confused about some of the relationship, but I don't understand. So essentially, Acreage is going to send over 5 or 6 people to help train in the 5 people here that don't have any experience in the industry.
So, well, I wouldn't say that they don't have any experience in the industry. They might not have run it. The 5 people on the board might not have run a dispensary before, but they have expertise in aspects of the industry, whether it's public health or wellness management, retail, running local businesses on Nantucket, running food growing and processing on Nantucket. So I would say there's a high level of experience in all the parts of this. And then also the people coming to the table from Acreage who have experience running dispensaries or operating the pharmaceutical aspects of this and the clinical aspects of it and advising on it. So I think that experience is all there. But Acreage is coming in as a management consultant and operating consultant. So the nonprofit hires the operator to fulfill everything from designing to growing to processing to training to selling, from soup to nuts.
So are those services what that 15% interest rate is supposed to cover, or is there an additional contract for those additional services?
There's an additional contract which outlines all the services, from the branding aspect and training and everything as well.
And the executive committee, is there any financial benefit or gain for them at all to be on that original 5 board members?
Not currently, nor is there anticipated, although there might be some, nominal compensation but there's not.
Hi, I'll just give you an example. So if I was a hotel developer and I bought a hotel and I wanted to put a Four Seasons flag on the hotel, I would pay a fee to Four Seasons to get their expertise. It's a very similar arrangement. On top of that fee that I might pay Four Seasons to get their manual, I might also pay like a 25% annual fee on top of my revenue to get marketing support. So this is a very similar arrangement in that sense, if that helps.
Well, I guess I'm just trying to figure out how, at the end of the day, this is being sold as a potential benefit to the town in terms of, I don't know, reinvestment in the community.
Right.
I think I read in one place in there, you're going to do something with the hospital about cannabis research.
Yes.
Another place you mentioned you're going to do off-island transports and things. How do we make sure that's what happens, rather than at the end of the day there's no money left for any of that stuff, but Acreage took home a real big chunk of money for the year?
Right.
That kind of thing.
Well, I don't want to in any way suggest that Acreage is a nonprofit company. It's not. Acreage is a business, right? So there are expenses, and then there's contracts, and there's profits, and Acreage is being hired as a for-profit company to come and provide services. That's what contractors do. When someone builds my house, I hire them, they come in, they bring in the subs, and they charge me a markup, and they make some money, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, what I get for it is a house. And here, what the nonprofit is going to get for it is a first-class facility for Nantucket that is going to be the best product for our community. However, we also anticipate that the facility will generate revenue in excess of costs, and that creates opportunity for the nonprofit to have excess funds. However, we don't have to rely on that, because we will be entering into agreements in advance to make sure that certain levels of donations will be made, and that is something that we see is happening through the select board level and through the host community agreement, where there's the fee that's paid to the town that's required through the tax structure, but also a community benefit that is the town is requiring through its licensing, and we would expect that the town that would require a real enforceable commitment, and we don't expect the town to direct, you have to give X dollars to Y recipient, but that there would be a donative or charitable program in place that would be mandated, and that fund has to be available. And Chris, I don't know if you want to say more.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I really see, you know, the relationship here. It's really a strategic partnership, right? And you know, and it's one of the reasons it got set up this way is, you know, having the local board, the local supervisory board that knows the pulse of Nantucket, right? And you know, along with our expertise. I mean, we're committed to being here. You know, the group that's sitting here in Acreage, we're committed here for the long haul. We want to be good corporate citizens. Say, you know, everything, all the donations here. You know, we have talked with the Cottage Hospital, which we're really excited about that potential opportunity. You know, we've in our application committed money to the town in an excess of the host community agreement because we see it as a need. You know, we are looking for you know, a recreational license, you know, but and medical license. At our heart, we're really education and outreach focused, right? It is our mission to provide safe, dosable, predictable products to our customers that come in here, right? And you know, that's one of the reasons why, you know, we have Al D'Amica. He's a pharmacist, right? We don't have to have pharmacists here in Massachusetts, but Al will be out here training our staff. He'll be out here, you know, being a resource to customers that come in, right? We see the community engagement. It's very important to us and something that we are 100% committed to do.
So if the nonprofit board determines that Acreage is not a good corporate citizen or is too expensive and there's a better deal, frankly, they could get rid of Acreage. That's not what Acreage wants to happen. That's not what South Shore Biofarmer wants to happen. But that's the application in front of you. You're being asked to award a nonprofit these licenses. And I think that as a community, that is a safeguard that we should place a high value on. Because unlike Act Natural, which is going to have a license that it could sell to investors or could sell to a national company, and in fact, you know, Mike Sullivan has told people that he's in talks with other companies to participate, other national companies to participate. And I have an email that says that if you want to know, you know, why I think that.
I'm sorry, could you maybe refrain from talking about the other applicant and just speak to your
Sure.
application?
So the nonprofit can't sell its license and has no interest to do so because there's no benefit for the nonprofit to do that. The for-profit company that is before you is interested in making money for its owners, for its investors.
Steve, I think I just said.
Okay, well, just as a comparison. But
yeah. Okay,
the nonprofit has no interest in doing that. It doesn't benefit from doing that.
Question. In the seemingly, in my opinion, unlikely event that Mass Medi Spa fires Acreage, what is to prevent, where would the town's control be or town's input or say in who they engage?
Sure. The host community agreement could easily have a approval clause.
Okay.
I would expect it to.
So just kind of going back a bit to, you covered a lot in your, so thank you for doing that. Common questions. What is your general business philosophy? I think we've heard that. Do you plan to focus your business plan on Nantucket solely or elsewhere? Is Mass Medi Spa only in Nantucket?
Only on Nantucket.
Do we have any questions about that? Can you provide an estimate as your anticipated volume of customers? I think we heard the answer to the potential roadway configuration changes. You said yes, you could potentially help out with that if the town
Yeah,
so deems, but
on the roadway stuff, that we would anticipate having road improvements, having the online appointment only, having, to the extent necessary to mitigate traffic, that we would have shuttle, that we would have charter service, that we would do, basically everything that is smart to do to make sure that there's no traffic issues. In terms of the volume of customers, I would defer to Chris.
Yeah, one of the things out here on Nantucket, it's highly seasonal, right? And in the summertime, we might expect to see anywhere from 100, 150 customers per day in our dispensary, and we have a number of different processes in order to accommodate that many people, from having additional point of sales, from having a parking attendant, having off-site parking as well, and potentially even going to appointment only. It's something. It's obviously it's new in Massachusetts. Seeing it's all on the news with the dispensaries that have opened. But we're committed to work directly with the town if any of those issues really arose. And are committed to do that.
Okay. And does the committee have any other questions about the customers? Okay.
You guys said you're treatment focused, but this is all here because we're talking about recreational purchasing. How are the recreational consumers going to be respected in their access?
Yeah. What we do on the medical side, I can start there. We have consultation rooms directly built into our dispensaries, right? So every patient that comes in has the ability to sit down with a technician and review their patient history. We would still offer those same services to recreational patients as well. A lot of what we find is that even recreational customers are still trying to look for some sign of relief, right? Whether it's self-medicating, for back pain or anything else, right? So we it's not just education on the medical side, but it's also education into the plant, the different cannabinoids, the different terpenes that make it up, to help find that experience that they're looking for.
Yeah, I think I just meant more in like straight up time open to access. So like if you're busy because you're focused medically, how can I make sure that I can self-medicate? Do you see what I mean? Like,
Henry, are you asking if their slots will be reserved?
Yeah, like there's appointments. I mean, we're not supposed to compare, but like the last one we talked about appointments, right? And like how that would work. So like, I'm just not hearing a whole lot from the retail. I mean, let's not beat around the bush here. We're a vacation community. People like to come in here and self-medicate. Like, what happens when people are being treated?
Well,
is there an appointment slot? Is there?
Well, I think that there's a number of different ways that we can do it, right? And I think ultimately we have to see how the market develops, right? And we would hire additional staff to meet the demands that are required. If we in our dispensary we look to have a 2-to-1 ratio from customers to employees, right? If we exceed that, our reception staff inside of our man trap would not allow them to come in, right?
I think that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, if we don't have enough parking, we would work with a shuttle, right? And I think we can get creative on how this. We don't want it to be a public nuisance, with lines outside the dispensary. But yes, we are willing to do appointment only.
Not at all. I'm hearing a lot about medical treatment, but I think a lot of this discussion revolves around the average legal consumer.
Yep.
Right. I mean, that's probably where a lot of traffic will come from, because the medical community, while we don't have a dispensary and it'll be a great benefit to them, they've been getting what they need for the most part.
Yep.
Right. It's the legal retail population that will be the new customer, so to speak.
I guess, Henry, I would distinguish between the way you seem to be defining it and the way we define it, in the sense that prescription versus recreational is not necessarily dealing with medical conditions. We think that most of the people coming into the building are coming in for some reason other than to just have fun. But That said, what we have is a facility that has sufficient parking, sufficient retail space, a large variety of strains, the largest variety of strains, the largest seed library, and the ability to grow and store and make available varieties and strains that are good for basically anybody who wants it for anything. So if you want to target something, we would have the capacity to do that. We'd have the capacity to have you come and park, to have you get in the building, and to have you select from a wide variety of products.
Great.
So there's something for everybody.
Right, Henry, I think that this is also an opportunity for this group to really define their brand positioning. And coming from the wellness industry, right, like the recent research from the Global Wellness Institute says that the wellness industry is a $4.3 billion industry, with cannabis and CBD being the leading trend driving that growth. So over the course of the next 10 years, you're going to see cannabis or CBD in all kinds of products. And I think one of the unique opportunities for this board is to be able to form a brand that really focuses on the wellness aspect of this and educate people on how to best use it, which is a slightly different thing than just considering medical and recreational. But coming down the middle and saying, we're not promoting this as a recreational thing per se, we're creating a brand that focuses on the wellness aspects of using cannabis.
Yeah, no, I think, sorry to misunderstood.
That's okay.
Getting on the side track. I
It's
meant
okay.
more of this strictly access to employees, which I
Right.
think your colleague, the 2-to-1 ratio,
Yep.
addressed. And
Yep.
in other dispensaries I've gone to, there's not like a treatment room or anything. My cousin, for example, has brain cancer that metastasized
Right.
to the ocular nerve.
Right.
He gets a shot, which is way different from the joint that I buy. So,
Right.
but yet they are both sold by the same person, which it sounds like is different in this situation. So like I come in for ocular nerve treatment, I talk to counselor, I want to come get high, I talk to
Well, so
the
basically,
retail guy.
people will be doing health assessments and then being paired up with the right person to help them.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question about, sorry.
Okay.
About the, going back to the anticipated traffic or the number of customers. In the plan, it said 4,000 annually, which seems to be on the lowest end of the customer per patient per day, and it's significantly, it seems very low. And I'm just wondering how that, if you've used that number to plan on, how if you really think it's going to be, why did you choose the number 4,000 when it's so low?
When we look at the business plan out here, I mean, there's such a fluctuation from off season to on season, right? And there's a lot of variables that go into this, right? And we've seen different markets develop across the country much differently. And I think one of the challenges in putting together, customer volume, sales volume, you don't really know until you're open, right? And it's one of the things we've done. We know how to handle high volume as well as handle low volume as well. So we use our experiences from others. We may find that we are way off from that number, but we're confident that we can handle a lot more volume than that, or even less.
It's difficult. This is where this style of business plan without any of the specifics, there's two things now that seem to me to be very much missing. One is the relationship between Acreage and Mass Media. I think that relationship, that financial relationship would have been more clear if we had a better business plan. But also, I don't know that I'm entirely convinced how financially viable the business is if there's only 4,000 customers a year spending on average $50, even if they're spending $100 each. So again, I think the number of 4,000, I'm not quite sure what to make of it from a traffic point of view, from everything, plus the actual financial viability.
Yep. No, understood. Understood there. So, I think I just would want to say, being, associated with Acreage, that, a large company that has plenty of cash, that is able to, invest in here through a loan to fund operations if there is a shortfall, right? Like, we are committed to doing that. And that's, with that loan agreement, say we see 2,000 people and we're losing money, we're still able to, without going out and obtaining additional investors to cover that shortfall, that is part of this relationship as well.
Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left, and at 3:30, I think if we don't feel done yet, the committee will have to decide if we're going to continue this or what. So just want to make sure we've gotten to all of our questions. Question 4 of the common questions, the testing standards. I think you pretty well answered that, and I think you basically said you're going to have a state certified lab.
That built out of that standard, yeah.
Yep. And that you would be able to provide testing for independent cultivators or craft growers.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's correct. I'll just add, we've worked with MCR Labs, which was one of the first state licensed labs, as well as Vital Scientific, who actually helped write the rules and regulations for testing requirements in Massachusetts. So, we have both of, those groups to help us with quality control, both from a finished product, but also even going all the way back to the beginning and designing our biosecurity procedures from getting dressed up in suits and making sure no contaminants come in from the beginning. So, quality control is something that's very important to us, and we're committed. The lab that we're looking at currently, is well over $200,000 with the equipment that we're looking at, and that's something that we're committed to doing.
Thank you. Okay, into the proposal specific questions. The first one is to describe the business arrangement between Mass Medispa Acreage Holdings, South Shore Biopharma LLC, including how the town would be notified and or have control over transfers of management in the groups that are not Mass Medispa but are managing the business. I think you've answered some of that. It sounded to me like we still have a bit of question about that particular type of structure and how it really actually functions.
Go ahead.
Are there any other questions that we want to tackle first? I feel like we've been spending a lot of time on that, and we're not really
Getting anywhere? Getting more information?
getting more.
Can I ask one question about that? Basically, are there any other agreements between acreage or benefits to acreage? For example, you mentioned research. So if Mass Medi does research, is that owned by acreage? Are there any other arrangements or agreements that we should know about?
No, it would all be in a loan agreement in the management agreement.
And also those consulting services.
Correct.
Would we see those agreements?
Yeah, we'd be happy to share those.
Sure. No, I actually think that the structure should be extremely familiar to the town, because the town hires contractors to run things for it all the time, and the town is entirely in control of it, and the contractor runs the show, but the town is in charge, and that's
Okay.
not terribly different.
It's, I'd say, completely different. The town is not a business at all.
We read the contracts pretty closely, so it would have been very helpful to see those.
We'll move on from that for now, and if we feel like we want to come back to it, we can. What is the legal nature of Mass Medispa's control of the Tomahawk site, the legal nature of SSB's control of it, and what role acreage have with respect to the control of the site? I guess you've answered that as best you can.
Yeah, the owner of the site has a contractual obligation with an option to purchase to South Shore Biopharma, which is a subsidiary of Acreage, and Acreage has a commitment through its contract with Mass Medispa to build out this facility.
Okay.
I think other than the last question about the housing plan, I think they've pretty much answered all of them at this point.
I have one more question.
Okay.
You brought up community focus. I think one of the things that really stuck out to me was the sort of series of resignations. And again, the nature of my questions have to do with who are we really dealing with. So went from the boards changed fairly swiftly in the past year, with it really only becoming a community board, locally based community board, the day before the application was due. So can you speak to just any comments or clarification as to why that happened?
Absolutely. I think that's actually an excellent question. The original board, the people who all resigned, were a mix of people from Norwell and from Nantucket who originally started with the Norwell application and then decided to jump on the Nantucket bandwagon, and those people have all resigned. Then there was essentially a placeholder board while a local board was put together. And we waited until later on to appoint those people to the board because we wanted to develop the most appropriate board to have both local year-round people and also to have a wide variety of expertise that we were bringing to the table. And it was really only 6 months or something like that in which that took place. But I think that's what you have is all of the old people resigning, a new guy being in, as a placeholder, a local board being developed, and then that paperwork being filed. Filing that paperwork one at a time would have been an expensive, time-consuming, and even more confusing process than sort of waiting till the end, which is what we did.
Okay, we'll see in a couple minutes if we want to continue this. Would Acreage Holdings and Mass Spa and SSB all be willing to sign and be bound by the Town Host Community Agreement?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The specifics of the business plan as identified in item number 9 of the RFQ, there were some items in there that I don't know that we saw: credit line, credit history, things like that. Not sure we totally saw it all in the other proposal either, but where would that information be?
Well, Acreage and South Shore Biofarmer have committed to fund that project, and the finances of Acreage are publicly available documents. We're happy to provide any supplement that you need, but as I mentioned before, it's a listed company on the Canadian Stock Exchange with a $2 billion market cap. So if you want to have comfort that it is sufficiently financed to meet the obligations of this contract, I think that is something that can easily be demonstrated. Is that correct, Chris?
Yep, correct.
Thank you. I think you answered number 5. 6, I think we heard about. 7, we've heard about. I don't know about 8, but that was how a potential conflict of interest proposed to be addressed with the member of the Board of Health referenced in the proposal. That might be something that member has to deal with on their own.
I actually think that's super common and easy. She would just recuse herself from any matters for the Board of Health involving Mass Spa in the same way that every volunteer or appointee on every board recuses themselves whenever something they're interested in, have an interest in, comes in. In the same way that if Mariah Mitchell came in for the Board of Health, she would recuse herself.
Got it. Okay. We talked about the doctor's involvement or not, and the security guard issue, the Norwell facility. What's the plan to house local employees?
So we have several options there. We have the funding available to rent housing. We have the funding available to build housing on the 4 Forest Avenue location if needed. So part of that depends on how it shakes out in terms of who already has housing and who needs housing. So we have the finances and the capacity to do both of those things.
Okay. Let the other group have some closing statements. We don't have a whole lot of time for that. We had a bit of time for them, but if you want to make a closing statement or comments, feel free.
Yeah, I'll close as I opened. I think at the end of the day, Nantucket is going to have a facility, most likely in the Coven Pit, most likely, at a much greater capacity than the Green Lady site. And so this is the opportunity to have a large-scale site of the highest quality with the most experience and with the most local control. And I think that is going to be offered by having Acreage as the contractor and having a locally formed nonprofit board in control of it. And we have demonstrated a commitment towards the public health aspect of this, to the medical aspect of it, to the charitable aspect of it, and to the community aspect of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any last minute from the committee? Okay. So that concludes the interviews. And right now, I think the committee's plan is to take everything we heard under consideration. We have another meeting scheduled for next Tuesday, the 22nd at 1:30, I think. at 1:30, and our intent at that time is to complete our evaluation of the comparative criteria and hopefully be able to prepare a recommendation to the board. If we don't feel we have enough information or we want to make additional informational requests or anything comes up between now and then, we can take that up at that time. So subject to change, I think we'd want to, our goal is to make a recommendation to the board following our evaluation of the comparative criteria, but I don't want to promise everybody that that's what we're doing because it's going to depend on our discussion and that sort of thing. Okay, so I think,
So we'll set an agenda of just essentially discussion.
yeah, our agenda, I'll send it around. I don't think we've done it yet, but I think the agenda would be evaluate the comparative criteria and discuss and or potentially make a recommendation to the board. Something along those lines. Okay. Okay. I think we're adjourned for today, and we'll be back here in this room next Tuesday. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I should have said that. I'm sorry. Thank you all the proposers and your supporters for coming. We really do appreciate it, and we appreciate your time.